The Zorth command station floated above the red moon of Jekara. Its black metal surface shimmered in the light of a nearby dying star. Inside the main war room, the high-ranking officers of the Zorth Empire stood around a glowing table filled with tactical maps and ship positions. Admiral Kareth was tall with purple skin and a row of silver rings across his forehead. He stared at the screen with one bored eye and waved his hand to dismiss a new message that had just arrived from the Border Patrol. "Another alert, sir," the officer beside him said with a tired voice. "It is from Patrol Ship 7. They claim they found another human." A long silence followed, then came the sound of laughter, deep and cold and sharp. The officers around the table chuckled without concern. One even slapped the side of the command table as he laughed too loud to notice the worry growing on a younger officer's face. "A human again, really," Kareth said with a smirk, and raised one eyebrow. "This is what they send as a report. A single human out there in the dark. Please, the last time we found one, it was just a lost scavenger. Nothing to fear, just more empty noise from the edges of space." The younger officer, his name was Velan, did not laugh. He looked at the message again, his hands lightly shaking. He had read about humans in the training archives, about the old stories, the deleted records, the tales no one wanted to talk about anymore. And yet here it was, another alert, another warning, and no one cared. Sir Velan said, stepping forward, his voice unsure but firm. "I believe we should take this seriously. The patrol mentioned strange readings, no ship nearby, no weapons, just one human standing in the middle of the ruins. But the signal had strange pulses before it cut off. Maybe we should delay our next move." Kareth turned slowly to face Velan, his smile thin and his tone sharp. "Do you want us to panic every time someone sees a lone creature in the dark? Do you think this empire fears shadows? We have crushed fleets, we have turned planets to dust, and you want us to stop over one single human?" Velan swallowed hard. "I just think, sir, that the reports we've ignored before, they all started this way with one human." And then silence. "After, maybe we should check the archives. Maybe we should look again at what really happened before." Another round of laughter rolled through the room, and this time even louder. One officer said, "If we listened to every scared cadet who saw something strange, we would never leave the station. Do not let ghost stories from the academy shake you, boy." But Velan did not stop. He turned away from the group and walked toward the archive chamber. His badge gave him access to low-level files, nothing too secret, but enough to see the outlines of past events, hidden logs, buried reports, words scratched out and covered by official marks. But he found them, he found patterns. Small colonies vanished after reporting contact with a human. Not a group, not a fleet, just one. And every time the same result: silence, no bodies, no signals, no escape, just blank space and broken messages left behind. He watched one old video, blurry and half-corrupted. It showed a group of soldiers surrounding a figure standing on a cliff. The wind blew hard, but the human did not move. No fear, no sound. And then the camera shook, and the footage ended with static. And one final frame burned into the screen, red eyes glowing through a dark visor. Velan felt cold in his bones. He copied the file and ran back to the war room, where Kareth was now speaking with the hologram of another fleet commander, laughing again as he said, "They found a human. Send more ships to get rid of it once and for all." "Sir, please, you have to look at this," Velan said, pushing the device onto the table. "This file is real. The human was seen before a colony vanished, and then nothing. The same signs are here again. We should send a scout, not a fleet. We should be careful." Kareth waved his hand and knocked the device off the table. It clattered to the floor and broke into pieces. "Do you know what fear does? It makes empires weak. It makes soldiers hesitate. We are not here to fear. We are here to rule you. Forget your place, officer." Velan looked down, but inside his chest something was burning, something sharp and heavy, because he had seen the fear in the eyes of Commander on that old video. He had seen what came just before the screen turned to static, and he knew deep down that something was very wrong. Outside the station, the stars were quiet, as if watching, as if waiting. The red moon turned slowly beneath them, and somewhere far on the edge of the galaxy a figure stood alone on a ruined colony, dark armor glowing softly in the shadows, unmoving, unafraid, unreadable. Another patrol ship was already heading toward that planet. They would land soon. They would laugh, and they would not be ready. Velan returned to his quarters, unable to sleep, his eyes staring at the screen, showing the patrol ship getting closer to the human, reading their life signs, their energy levels, everything looked normal, but Velan knew better. Normal meant nothing when it came to humans, especially the ones who survived the wars, the ones who were never meant to be found again. He opened a private message window and typed out a warning to a friend on a nearby station. They found another human. Stop them. If you can, do not engage, do not speak. Just leave. But he knew it was already too late. The system would flag the message as panic and delete it before it reached anyone. In the war room, Kareth poured himself a drink and toasted the stars, laughing again at the idea that one lone human could ever matter. He did not know that this time it was not just another human. It was the last one. The worst one. And now there was no one left to warn them. Velan sat in the lower data chamber of the Zorith command station, surrounded by old screens and blinking lights. Most officers never came down here because it smelled like burnt wires and lost time, but Velan knew this was where secrets lived, the kind that no one wanted to remember. He tapped on the console with shaky fingers. Each file he opened was slower than the last, protected by codes long forgotten and names erased from the empires. Records. There were layers of silence here, wrapped around half-truths, and fear wrapped around one word that always came back. Human. He typed it in again and watched the screen flicker. An error warning blinked at him, then vanished, replaced by a loading bar crawling across the glass, like it did not want to be found. One by one the files appeared, each one darker than the last. Colonies wiped out with no sign of a fight, fleets destroyed without a single warning, no explosions, no escape pods, just sudden loss, and one common phrase at the end of each report: we believe a human was involved. Velan leaned forward, his heart pounding louder than the hum of the cooling vents nearby, his breath catching in his throat as he read the mission logs, full of confident commanders who all said the same thing: it is only one human, it is no threat. And then silence. He opened one report from Station Vecker 12. The last transmission was video only. It showed a wide desert world, quiet, and still. The Zorith team landed with 10 armored guards. They walked toward a black shape standing near the edge of a canyon, no weapon in its hand, no movement, no sound. The commander called out, said to drop any weapons. The figure didn't answer it, just tilted its head like it was listening to something no one else could hear. And then the image, distorted like reality itself, had cracked, and the feed cut off. The last audio clip was nothing but a faint whisper in the static, and Velan thought he could hear the word run. He saved the file quickly before it could be deleted. The system seemed to be cleaning the reports automatically, each one vanishing seconds after being viewed, as if someone or something wanted them buried forever. He tried to message the upper officers again, but the system denied his access. This time the red warning across the screen said, "You are not cleared for panic communication, level restricted by command." He sat back in his chair, hands on his face, trying to breathe, trying to think. The laughter from earlier still echoed in his ears, but it felt distant now, like a ghost memory fading under a storm. He knew something terrible was coming, and no one wanted to see it. In the halls above, the officers continued their plans. They moved ships like game pieces and marked territories with digital flags. The patrol ship that had found the human was now overdue. No response in 12 hours, no emergency beacon, no distress call, nothing. Commander Telrox said they were likely just having communication issues, nothing serious, probably solar interference or a broken antenna. We'll fix it in post. That's what he always said when missions went silent. But Velan knew better now. He had seen too much. He had read what others tried to hide, and what frightened him most was the timing, because every report followed the same pattern: first a sighting, then silence, then lost total and permanent. He watched a screen showing Patrol Ship 9 now en route to the same coordinates, their course, direct, their confidence high, the crew laughing in their pre-mission video, calling it a milk run. They even joked about bringing back souvenirs from the surface. Velan whispered to himself, "They will not come back." He pulled up more files. One showed an elite squad from the Red Claw division wiped out in under 10 minutes. Last message was a simple phrase, sent by accident on an open channel: "We are not fighting a soldier. We are fighting something else, something wrong, something ancient." He checked the location tags and noticed something strange. Every incident happened within the same region of space, a circular dead zone, with no trade routes, no colonies, no patrols, as if the Empire had quietly declared it cursed and left it alone, hoping the silence would be enough to forget. But now they had gone back. They had sent ships again and stirred something awake. Velan copied the files onto an old physical drive, the kind used before cloud syncs and satellite control, something he could carry in case the system locked him out completely, which it already seemed to be doing faster than he expected. He stuffed the drive into his uniform pocket and left the chamber, walking fast through the narrow maintenance corridors, trying not to think about what the files showed, trying not to picture the red visor, the tall figure, the empty canyons, and the screaming silence that always followed. In the main chamber, Admiral Kareth was reviewing a new fleet formation, 10 ships, prepared for deployment to the human location. He called it Operation Silence Clean, and quick crush whatever threat was there and send a message across the stars. Velan stepped into the room with his drive held tight in his hand. "Sir, you need to stop this," he said, his voice louder than before. "This is not just a human. This is the one from the deleted files from the forbidden missions. Please just look at this one file." Kareth looked up with cold eyes, and then laughed again. "You really are obsessed, boy," he said. "But fine, show me your little ghost story." Velan reached to plug the drive into the console, but the system flashed red access, denied the command table, blocked the drive, autolocked, and wiped it in seconds. Kareth smiled. "You see, this is what fear does. It makes you chase shadows. We are the light." He dismissed Velan with a wave and turned back to his fleet map, unaware that outside the patrol ship had just reached the ruined colony, its landing gear settling on scorched stone, its scanners showing one life form still standing and moving in the middle of the blast field. The crew stepped out in full gear, weapons raised, laughter in their voices as they approached the silent figure standing beneath the dead sky. Inside the station, Velan watched the live feed from a backup monitor not connected to central command. He saw the moment the audio died, the moment the camera began to shake, the moment the stars behind the human seemed to bend and twist. He saw one frame freeze before blackness, a frame showing a single hand raised, a warning or a farewell. He could not tell. Then the screen went dark, and no one was laughing anymore. Patrol Ship 9 touched down on the burned surface of Altor 3, its wings folding with a soft hiss as dust curled around its landing pads. The world was quiet beneath them. Broken metal structures lay twisted under the cold sky, shadows stretched across cracked ground, and nothing moved except for the wind. Commander Riven stood at the front of the landing ramp, his armor shining dark blue with silver trim, his squad behind him, 10 strong elite soldiers with years of combat training, every one of them ready for action, bored, even expecting nothing serious. The ship's scanner had picked up only one life form in the ruins ahead, a humanoid reading warm, stable, not moving, no visible weapons, no radio signals, no vehicles nearby, just standing there like a statue in the ash. Riven grinned under his helmet and waved his hand forward. "All right, team, let's meet the ghost and get out of here. Maybe we can get back before dinner." The squad moved fast, their boots kicking up dust, their helmets scanning in all directions, but there was nothing, not a trace of life, no animals, no plants, just blackened ground and old ruins reaching up like bones from the earth. Then they saw the figure. It stood near what looked like the remains of a communication tower, the metal twisted and melted into strange shapes. The figure stood completely still, facing them as if it had been waiting the entire time, tall, silent, and wrapped in a dark suit with no markings, a helmet with a red glow across the visor, hiding any trace of a face. Riven raised his weapon, but did not fire. Instead, he took a few steps forward, his voice calm but amused. "This is Patrol Ship 9. We are part of the Zorth Empire. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself." The figure did not move. Riven frowned and waved to his second to scan again. Still no weapons, no energy build up. Just that same steady life sign. Nothing else. It was wrong somehow, but the number said safe. He tried again. "You are trespassing under Imperial Code 12. You must surrender and respond, or you will be considered a hostile." The figure tilted its head slightly, not much, just enough to make the squad shift nervously behind their commander. The movement was slow, too slow, and smooth, like time was stretched around it. Riven felt a cold sting at the back of his neck. He lowered his rifle just a bit and tried one last time. "We do not want conflict. Step forward and remove your helmet, or we will be forced to detain you." Nothing happened for 3 long seconds. Then the lights on the patrol ship flickered, just once, almost like a blink, and when they looked again, the figure was gone. Riven spun around, scanning the area, shouting commands, but the scanners were failing. The location tag jumped from one point to another, showing the human 10 meters behind, then to the left, then above the tower, then gone. Weapons ready, the squad circled up there, breathing tight, and heavy, their training kicking in, but no one had ever trained for this. Private Jex stepped forward cautiously, weapon raised, scanning hard. Then his voice cracked through the radio. "I see it behind the wreckage, moving fast." Before anyone could respond, the feed from Jex's helmet turned to static. A loud screech echoed through the comms, and then Silence's location tag blinked twice, then vanished. Riven shouted for cover. The squad broke formation and took defensive positions around the ruins, trying to get a visual, but there was nothing. The dust swirled, and the wind howled, and the red sky pressed down on them like a hand. Then Private Harl screamed a sharp cutting sound, and his signal dropped to 2 down in 20 seconds. No shots fired, no warning, just gone. Panic began to rise inside them, though they fought to control it. Riven called for immediate evacuation. The patrol ship began warming engines, but the systems were glitching, lights, flickering power, cycling through endless loops. Private Len saw movement near the fallen tower and fired a full burst into the dark, but the bullets hit nothing, only metal, only smoke. And then she too was gone, her scream echoing once before vanishing into static. 4 down in under a minute. Riven's hands trembled as he activated the emergency beacon, but it jammed, a red message flashing across his visor. Signal denied, signal disrupted, unknown interference. He turned and shouted toward the patrol ship, but before he could finish, a low humming sound filled the air like a song underwater, deep and endless, and full of something ancient, something terrible. The last 6 members of the squad closed ranks, weapons out, scanning in every direction, breathing fast, but trying to stay calm. Then one by one they started seeing it. The figure was everywhere, every camera, every corner of their eyes, moving faster than anything should, twisting through angles that made no sense. Its visor, always watching, always glowing red, like a slow burn in the dark. Private Vex fired wildly, but his gun overheated in seconds and exploded in his hands. He fell to the ground screaming and vanished into smoke. Private Zal tried to run toward the patrol ship, but the ramp closed before he could reach it. Then his signal died to the ship itself, now fully powered, began to rise, without order, its thrusters lighting up as if controlled by something else. Commander Riven shouted into the comms for emergency liftoff, but the ship responded with silence. Then a voice came through, soft, low, human, but not quite right. "You came again." Riven froze. That voice was not part of his team. It was not from the Empire, and it was not recorded. The voice spoke again. "We gave you warning long ago. We left your worlds. We stayed away. And yet you came again." The ship shook in the air, its engines stuttering. Then it crashed back down in a cloud of fire and dust, burning across the ruins. The last 2 squad members fired every weapon they had into the shadows until their guns ran dry, and then there was nothing left but the wind. Riven stood alone, breathing heavy, visor cracked, armor scorched, one hand shaking at his side. The figure stepped forward, now visible, once more, its footsteps silent on the broken stone. "You laughed at us again," the voice said, not from the mouth, not from a speaker, but from inside Riven's own head, slow and calm and final. Riven tried to speak, tried to ask why, but the words never left his lips. And then there was silence. Only the red glow remained. The Zorith Empire received the alert 6 hours after Patrol Ship 9 had gone dark, a blinking red signal marked failure. Across every command screen, no audio, no video, no logs, just silence, followed by a corrupted pulse that crashed the fleet's mainframe for 12 full seconds. Admiral Kareth stared at the frozen symbol on his screen, eyes narrow, mouth tight. Behind his silver rings, something flickered in his mind, an old discomfort, a memory, maybe, but it vanished before he could hold it. He waved his hand and dismissed the technicians who were mumbling about data loss and sensor failure. "Tell the engineers to fix it," he said, no emotion in his voice. "If the patrol failed, we send another." Commander Telrox stepped closer, his face pale. "Something about this feels wrong, sir," he said softly. "2 ships lost in the same system. We have no video. We have no survivors. We should wait, assess the threat, maybe send a probe." Kareth turned sharply, his voice louder than before. "A probe will only tell us what we already know. Something is there, and it needs to be removed. We are not afraid of shadows or broken signals. We are the Zorith Empire." Behind him, the younger officer Velan listened from the side of the chamber. He held his hands behind his back tightly, his fingers digging into his own skin. He had not slept since the first ship vanished. He had seen the footage, the archives, the whispers hidden in the silence. He tried again to speak. Sir, we cannot fight this thing like a normal enemy. Every time we do, we lose. And we never understand why we never even see it. Please let us stop and think before sending more ships. Kareth ignored him and pointed to the map. 5 more patrols ready and waiting, loaded with elite troopers and AI command corps, each ship named after a victory from the Empire's great wars, each one armed with weapons that had turned planets into smoke. Send them now, he said. I want that system cleared before the next rotation. The ships launched within the hour, moving like daggers through the void, their hulls shining like polished obsidian, their captains confident, their systems humming with perfect precision. They reached Altor 3 on schedule, each ship spreading out around the surface in search patterns, data flowing between them clean and constant, all readings normal, except for one fact: there were still no signs of the first patrol, no debris, no armor, no blood, just nothing. Patrol Ship 12 reported the strange fog, first a gray mist rising from cracks in the stone, though the atmosphere data said it was clear. The fog moved against the wind, sometimes moving toward the soldiers instead of away. Then Ship 13 detected power surges from the ruins, impossible spikes of energy coming from a tower that should have been dead for 100 years. The scanners tried to analyze it, but every scan failed, returning only 3 words: origin not known. Ship 14 made visual contact with something standing near the crater where the last patrol had landed. They zoomed in from orbit and captured a single image: a dark armored figure looking directly at the ship despite being too far to see with the naked eye. 2 minutes later, Ship 14 lost power and fell from orbit, crashing in silence. The crew lost with no distress call. Panic spread across the fleet. Communications scrambled. Ships began to retreat and realign, and then Ship 11 opened fire. Without order, without command, every weapon on its hull aimed at a blank section of land where nothing was visible but heat shimmer. The shots burned craters into the surface for 5 seconds, then stopped, and the crew inside reported seeing something move in the smoke. Ship 10 tried to pull Ship 11 away, but its engines refused to respond. The lights inside began to flicker, and the crew started sending messages filled with static and screams. No one could understand the words except one phrase repeated over and over: we are not alone, we are not alone, we are not alone. Then Ship 10 exploded from the inside, the fire spreading through its core before its emergency systems could activate. Velan watched all of this from the lower command bay, his eyes wide, his heart pounding. Every screen around him showing fragments of disaster. One officer behind him whispered, "This is not war, this is a curse." Admiral Kareth stood frozen, now sweat on his brow, lips pressed into a thin line. "This is sabotage," he said. "This is interference. Someone is jamming our systems. Find the source." But no source was found, no jamming signal, no hidden ship, no cloak, just silence and empty space and dead ships falling like rain. The last ship in orbit, Ship 15, tried to escape before the storm reached it. The pilot initiated a full jump drive sequence, but the system failed to lock coordinates. A strange loop appeared in the navigation code, repeating the word human in dozens of languages across the galaxy. Then the jump system activated on its own, and the ship vanished, without trace, never arriving at its destination, never reappearing at any known point in space-time or memory. Velan stood beside the emergency console, his voice shaking as he spoke. "Sir, we are not facing a soldier. We are not facing a species. We are facing something else, something old, something that remembers what we did." Kareth finally looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time said nothing. The fleet was gone. 5 more ships lost in less than 1 day. No remains, no reports, only the final transmission from Ship 11 recovered from a deep backup channel, a broken voice whispering into the void. "We found him. He is not dead. He is not alone. And we should not have come." The Zorith Empire held a private meeting that evening among the high command, trying to explain the loss, trying to name the danger without using the word human, because saying it now felt like calling death by name. But the citizens had already heard fragments from the outer signals, whispers from trade ships passing nearby, stories spreading like fire across the stars. One man, one figure, one human, bringing entire fleets to their knees. Velan returned to his chamber, unable to sleep, unable to eat, staring at the stars through the narrow window above his bed, wondering how many more would have to die before they listened, before they stopped laughing, before they realized it was never a joke. It was always a warning. And now it was too late to run. The stars over Sector Zeta 9 shimmered like shattered glass, sharp and cold against the black sea of space. The Central War Fleet of the Zorith Empire moved into formation, like a wave of silent giants, their engines glowing faint blue against the void, a sign of calm confidence that had grown from centuries of victory. Admiral Kareth stood on the bridge of the lead command cruiser, his eyes locked on the holographic field in front of him. 150 warships now circled Altor Three, each one armed with plasma torpedoes, hull shatter cannons, and defense drones that had never failed a mission before. He had added 50 more ships since the last incident. He wanted the full power of the Empire to strike together to end this foolish story once and for all. No more whispers, no more superstition, just fire and metal and silence. On his right stood Commander Tazen, the most experienced battle coordinator in the region. He leaned in close and whispered quietly into the Admiral's ear. Reports from the surviving engineers are unreliable. They mention impossible things, movement that cannot be tracked, time loops, sensor blindness. Kareth raised one hand sharply, silencing him. What matters now is firepower. He said, we do not wait. We do not speak. We crush whatever is down there and erase it from every record. Then we move forward like it never existed. Tazen hesitated, but nodded slowly. He could see the anger burning in the Admiral's eyes, but beneath it was something else, something cold and shaky, like a fear that had been buried for too long. On the lower deck of the ship, Velan watched the countdown begin. He had been moved from command duties after questioning the fleet's decisions, now assigned as a technician on deck support. His voice no longer welcome, his warnings considered weakness. He leaned against the wall, listening to the war drums building as the targeting systems aligned and the assault waves armed themselves with the most powerful weapons in the Empire's arsenal. His heart was heavy, his breath shallow. He knew this was not going to work. He had seen what the others ignored. Down on the surface of Altor Three, the ruins were silent again, broken stone and melted towers reaching upward like frozen screams. The wind moved without sound, and in the center of the shattered city stood the figure alone, still untouched, the red glow of its visor shining faintly like the last ember of a fire that refused to die. A drone passed overhead, scanning the area, sending the feed directly to the command fleet. The image was clear. It showed only the figure, no weapons, no defenses, no traps, no fleet, just one shape unmoving beneath the open sky. Tazen frowned and spoke softly again. Something is wrong here, sir. Why would it remain in one place, unprotected, unafraid? Kareth stepped closer to the screen and narrowed his eyes. He does not believe in fear, he said, then turned to his officers. Launch full strike. One, all ships fire in pattern. Storm Wave Alpha reduced the entire region to dust now. Orders flashed through the fleet, and within seconds hundreds of plasma blasts and rail torpedoes screamed toward the surface. The sky over Altor Three filled with fire, the air tearing apart from the sheer force of the attack. The ground shattered, buildings melted, sand turned to glass, and smoke rose in black columns high into the stars. The fleet watched in silence, expecting nothing to remain. But when the smoke cleared, the figure was still there, unmoving, untouched. Kareth froze and stepped back from the screen, his mouth opened, but no words came. The scanners confirmed that the coordinates were exact. The entire surface had been destroyed, but one shape remained unchanged, as if the attack had never happened. A strange pulse then echoed through the fleet, like a whisper carried on broken frequencies. Not loud, not painful, but impossible to block. It entered every ear, every screen, every mind. You brought everything. Now you will lose everything. One by one, ships began to report system failures, power flickers, artificial gravity fluctuations, weapons locking onto their own fleets, shields shutting off. By command codes no one had entered. Admiral Kareth shouted to disconnect the central network, but it was too late. The entire command grid had been breached, without warning, without sound. Then the figure looked up. It raised one hand slowly, just one finger pointing to the sky. And then the ships began to fall. Cruiser Alpha 7 lost navigation and spun into the gravity field, smashing into a destroyer, and both vanished in a flash of blue fire. Frigate 18 went dark and launched all of its weapons, randomly striking 3 other ships before being torn apart by friendly fire. A dreadnought at the far edge of the formation turned around and jumped into hyperspace, without orders, never seen again. On the bridge of the command cruiser the lights flickered, and the walls creaked as if under pressure from something that was not real, something not from this dimension. Kareth shouted for control to be transferred to manual, But the consoles did not respond. Instead, the screen showed one image, the figure closer, now the red visor glowing brighter, and a message pulsing below it. You never understood. You only repeat. You forget the cost. Velan rushed to the main console, trying to bypass the network and regain navigation. He was not supposed to be here, but in the chaos, no one stopped him. He typed fast lines of code, falling like rain, but the system pushed back with strange symbols and repeated text in languages older than anything in the archive. He looked at Kareth and shouted, "We need to retreat. Now, we need to leave this system before it takes everything." But the Admiral could not speak, his face pale, his eyes wide as he watched ship after ship vanish from the screen, as if erased from time. The lights dimmed again, and the floor shook as the command cruiser began to lose altitude, being pulled down toward the planet by a force that did not exist, a force that had no name. Outside, the wreckage floated slowly across the sky, broken metal glowing with fire and sparks, as the Empire's finest fleet was reduced to pieces by an enemy that never lifted a weapon, never sent a threat, never raised its voice. Just one figure still standing at the center of a dead world, waiting, watching, remembering. Velan felt the ship tilt harder, alarms blaring around him, red lights spinning like dying stars. He turned to the emergency pod door and forced it open, pulling the nearest officer with him and slamming the release button. The pod launched out of the cruiser just seconds before the main deck exploded, fire rolling through the hull as the ship split into two and began falling toward the ruins below. Inside the pod, Velan looked back and saw the burning trail, the crashing light, and then he saw the figure again, standing on a broken platform, raising its hand again slowly, as if to say goodbye, or perhaps welcome. The pod escaped the gravity field just in time and drifted into the outer atmosphere, floating through wreckage and silence. Velan sent a short message to any who could hear, repeating the only thing that mattered now. Do not come here. Do not send ships. Do not speak the name. This is not a human. This is the last memory of war. And it does not forget. And it never forgives. The escape pod drifted through cold space, silent and alone, spinning slowly through the debris field that once had been the pride of the Zoreth Empire. The stars above were distant and quiet, like they too were afraid to shine too brightly near this place. Inside the pod, Velan sat curled against the wall, his breath shallow, his eyes wide, his face pale with the kind of fear that never fades. His hands trembled as he clutched the small backup transmitter, the only device still working after the pod had powered down most systems to preserve life support. Outside, metal floated in the void, glowing dimly from recent fire, pieces of ships twisted into shapes that defied logic, the remains of 1,000 lives scattered like forgotten stories across the edge of the galaxy. Velan pressed the activation button on the transmitter. The light blinked once, then held steady. It was working. The signal would go out across emergency relay channels, repeating over and over like a broken prayer in the dark. Do not approach Sector Zeta 9. Do not send ships. Do not engage the anomaly on Altor 3. This is a warning, not a request, not a threat, a warning. The message looped while Velan sat in silence, trying to steady his breath, his mind still replaying the last image he had seen before the pod escaped, the glowing visor, the raised hand, the voice inside his head that spoke with the weight of history. He closed his eyes, but could still hear it echoing through his thoughts, words that did not belong to any language, but were understood all the same. You remember now. The message spread across the stars, picked up by mining rigs listening for distress calls, by smugglers hiding near asteroid belts, by trading stations monitoring the outer colonies, and then by the official channels of the Zoreth Empire itself. It caused confusion first, then disbelief, then fear, as the High Council reviewed the footage received from the last working drones sent before the blackout, images of the fleet shattering in silent fire, and one standing figure watching unmoved. They summoned scientists, military leaders, scholars, and ancient code interpreters, but no one had answers, only questions that brought silence to the room every time they were asked, what is it, why did we not know, and how can one survive what no species should? The Emperor himself watched the footage on a private screen, his hand frozen over the console, his face lit by the red glow of the visor that stared back through the screen, like it knew. He was watching, like it remembered him, like it remembered everything. Across the galaxy, fear spread not through battle, not through invasion, but through story, through whispers, through warnings passed in low voices from planet to planet, from soldier to civilian, from child to elder. Have you heard? They found one. Not just any human. The one that remained. The one they could never kill. The one that erased fleets without blinking. The one that remembers. They gave it names, but none felt strong enough. Some called it the Revenant, others said it was the last flame. Some believed it was not human at all, but something that had once been human, and had become something else, something old, something tired, something full of purpose. Trade routes near Altor Three were shut down, colonies nearby evacuated quietly without official orders, as if the Empire itself was afraid to speak of it in public, as if giving it form through words might bring it closer. Religious cults formed in the Outer Rim, praying to or against the Red Visor, building temples shaped like broken helmets, lighting fires that never died. Some worshipped it as a god, some feared it as a demon, most just wanted it to stay far away. In the halls of military command, officers resigned and silent soldiers refused assignments near the Forbidden Zone. Engineers who reviewed the last drone footage went blind in one eye without explanation. Some began to speak in their sleep, repeating phrases that made no sense yet sounded like prophecy. Do not rise. Do not return. We did not forget. We only waited. Velan was taken in by a neutral medical ship 3 days after the escape pod sent its final beacon. The crew found him barely alive, but awake, his eyes open wide the entire time. He never screamed, never cried. He just whispered. They never listened, over and over again until his voice broke. He was moved to a recovery station orbiting a quiet moon and placed under protection. He refused to speak to the Empire, to the Council, to the generals. He only agreed to one thing. He wanted to send one message to the galaxy himself, in his own words, without edit, without interference. The transmission was sent a week later, broadcast on all frequencies in all known languages, with no name attached, only a voice, quiet and slow and clear. You believed the stories were gone. You believed the threat had passed. You believed you could erase a memory with silence. But memory is not so weak. We remember what you did. We remember what you chose. And now you remember what we became. We are not your enemy. But we will never be your victim again. Stay away. Let the silence remain. Let the dead rest. And maybe, just maybe, we will do the same. The message was short and simple, but it echoed far and deep through every satellite, every station, every ear. Some laughed at it at first. Others dismissed it as a trick, a false flag, a test of loyalty. But those who had seen the footage, those who had known the names of the lost ships, those who had stared into the static of the destroyed transmissions, knew better. It was not a trick. It was not a game. It was not a warning. It was a promise. The Zorith Empire began to change slowly. Quietly, it stopped expanding near Sector Zeta 9. It rerouted travel lanes and marked Altor 3 as off-limits with silent red markers and encrypted codes that only meant one thing: do not enter. They never held a funeral for the fallen. There was no point, there were no bodies, no remains, just silence. And that silence said everything. Velan remained in isolation by choice, never leaving his room, never asking for more than light, food, and a screen to write down what he remembered, what he dreamed. His notes were never published, not by the Empire, not by the free colonies, but pieces of them began to appear in underground channels, in whisper feeds, in ghost frequencies across deep space. One sentence kept returning again and again like a heartbeat in the void. He is still there. He never moved. He is waiting. Not for war. Not for peace. For understanding. For silence. For memory. For the day someone finally says, "We were wrong," and means it. Far away from Altor 3, beyond the reach of most charts, and far beyond the courage of any crew, there floated a silent research vessel, its hull worn from age, its engines low, its lights dim and flickering. This vessel had no name on record, no insignia, no affiliation, and yet its systems were state-of-the-art, its signal clean, its purpose unknown. Inside the ship, a single figure stood in the central observation deck, an old woman with sharp eyes and a voice that had once commanded armies. Her name was Arona, once a high strategist of the first expansion, long retired, long forgotten, until whispers of the Revenant reached her again and again, until silence became too loud to bear. She watched the planet Altor 3 from a distance, through long-range visual scans. The surface, still broken, the sky, still quiet. And at the center of it all, that shape, Still they're never moving, never fading, standing like the echo of an old scream that would never die. Irona had read everything spoken with survivors, decrypted lost signals, studied corrupted footage, and even visited ruins from the last human colonies. She had learned one thing above all else: truth cannot be buried forever, not even by time, not even by fear. She recorded a message with trembling hands, her voice slow, but sharp, each word heavy with meaning. It is not revenge that waits down there, it is memory, it is pain turned solid, it is the shape of what happens when every voice is ignored, when every outstretched hand is slapped away. The message was stored, never sent, because she knew it would not matter. The ones who needed to hear it were long gone, and the ones left only wanted to forget. But forgetting had become impossible. In the underground markets of the Orion Shadows, there was a growing market for relics of the old wars: helmets, half-melted plasma cores, shattered swords etched with unknown words, each object sold with the same warning: never take it near Altor 3, never wake what sleeps. In the academies of the New Dawn Coalition, students whispered tales in low voices of the red visor, the figure that stood while fleets fell. They spoke it as myth, but their eyes held fear, the kind that is passed down, not taught. The Zorith Empire, now fractured into smaller states, had banned travel within 3 sectors of the ruined world, yet still some tried, drawn by greed, by pride, or by the need to know what no one else did. They launched silent expeditions, unmarked and unspoken, and none returned. The last known signal from such a mission came from a pilot named Dresk, his voice hollow and cracking as he spoke through static. I see him. He is not alone anymore. There are other shapes behind him, no faces, just shadows, and they are looking at me. After that, only static remained. Back on Altor 3, nothing changed, and yet everything did. The figure still stood among the ruins, but the air around it began to shimmer faintly, like a mirage in motion, like space itself was uneasy. The red visor pulsing not with light, but with rhythm, like a heartbeat, like breath, like thought. A child from the outer colonies once sent a message through an old radio channel. It had no destination, no protocol, just one line whispered with innocence: are you lonely down there? The signal reached the ruins days later, bouncing through abandoned satellites, through broken towers, until it arrived at the center. For the first time in decades, the figure moved its head slightly, just slightly, as if listening. Nothing else happened, but the stars that night seemed to flicker slower. Velan, now older, sat in a quiet room on a moon station, drawing with slow hands lines that made no sense to others, but to him told a story of echoes of ash and of silence, broken not by war, but by a single voice saying enough. He had not spoken aloud in years, but today he did. Today, he said, I think he waited long enough. No one heard him, but something shifted across space. In the Temple of the Forgotten Flame, a priest fell to the ground, shaking, eyes wide, screaming, he is walking again, and then he fainted. The ground around him cracked, without cause, without warning. A trader on a mining ship near the edge of the no-travel zone looked out the window and saw something strange, a ripple in the sky, like light bending, like the stars themselves were bowing for a moment. And on Altor 3 the figure began to walk. One step, then another, slow, unstoppable, not toward the sky, not toward space, but deeper into the ruins, into the past, into the memory it protected with stillness for so long. Each footstep echoed like thunder through empty towers, through cracked stones, through forgotten dreams. And as it moved, the world remembered. Buildings once shattered flickered with light, as if trying to recall their shape. Shadows began to rise behind the figure, not hostile, not violent, just present, just watching, like a crowd at a funeral that never ended. Each shadow held a memory, each one a story of pain, of betrayal, of silence, of fire. They did not speak. They did not need to. The figure walked until it reached the center of what once had been a sanctuary, a place where voices once rose together in song, before war, before fire, before the silence. It stopped there and looked up, not to the stars, but to the sky itself, as if waiting for something, as if asking a question that could not be spoken. And somewhere across the galaxy a signal answered. Not words, not threats, just one note, one soft rising tone, like the first breath after drowning, like light through ash. And the visor dimmed. Not off, just softer. Velan heard it from his room, felt it like warmth through cold metal. He smiled for the first time in decades, and whispered. He heard her, the child, he heard her. The stars did not change that night, but something else did. Across the galaxy dreams began to shift. Nightmares faded a little. Whispers slowed. Warnings softened. And people began to wonder not about fear, but about forgiveness. Not about destruction, but about memory. Not about war, but about what comes after. The figure stood still again, but now not as a guardian, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a monument. To the last fire. To the cost of forgetting. To the echo that remains when everything else is gone. And in the silent ruins of Altor Three, something impossible happened. A flower bloomed between the cracks. Small. Bright. Alive.